Mark Rogers TV doing what we like to do each and every Tuesday night. It's now a tradition as we review the College Football Playoff Committee rankings as they come out sometime around 7:30 Eastern Time. And then by the time we get a chance after that real job, we get a chance to dive into them late tonight on Tuesday. So the latest pre-championship weekend. Bama 1, Oregon 2, TCU 3, Florida State 4. The top four is what matter, of course. Ohio State and Baylor at 5 and 6 have the best shot of breaking the top four. Of course, Arizona is in a unique situation at number 7, playing number 2 Oregon. And for Michigan State, Kansas State, Mississippi State, and Georgia Tech, it's pretty much a crapshoot, although Georgia Tech would have the best opportunity playing the only undefeated team in the country in Florida State. So my rankings are Florida State's number 1. Okay, the reason I justify that is I continue to hear that Alabama's 1, Oregon's 2, or vice versa. Florida State's 3 because they're not as good based on the eye test and all these close calls that they have than Alabama and Oregon. Well, if you truly believe that you're rating the best teams in the country and you think that there's a bunch of other one-loss teams like possibly TCU, Baylor, Ohio State that are better than Florida State, then rank them ahead of Florida State. I continue to hear the argument that at that point at number 3, let's rank Florida State at number 3 because they're undefeated and they're proving that they win each week regardless of how ugly it is, so that they should be ranked ahead of these other one-loss teams. Well, if you adhere to that logic, you should adhere to it across the board, and Florida State should be number 1. And that's my claim. Not that they're the best team in the country, but they're the most deserving of number 1, because again, if you start to break down schedules, Florida State didn't play a great schedule, but Florida State's schedule is better than most give them credit for. The ACC's better this season in 2014 than we typically give it credit for. And I have been a huge detractor of the ACC, but the ACC line up the non-conference opponents of the ACC against the SEC, and they played like opponents, and the ACC finished at 10 and 6 and the SEC at 5 and 6. So take off the blinders, take off the SEC glasses that the SEC is definitely number 1, and let's look at it objectively. Against like opponents, take every team in the ACC non-conference games, SEC non-conference games, and the ACC performed better against like opponents than the SEC. Florida State's schedule is not horrible, and they're undefeated. I know the eye test says that BC should have knocked them off, Florida should have knocked them off, Louisville, Miami, Notre Dame, and maybe they really did legitimately lose to Notre Dame. If Notre Dame's wide receiver knew how to run a pick play, Florida State would have a loss. Okay, so I've got Florida State at 1. I've got Oregon because I believe that their schedule is more difficult than Bama's by a smidge. Basically, on the strength of the Michigan State non-conference game that completely blows away Alabama against the 7 and 5 West Virginia team. So Oregon at number 2, and now that loss to Arizona, who's jumped all the way up to number 7. And think about making this comparison weeks ago. Mississippi State, Arizona. And so for Alabama, it's a loss to Ole Miss. Ole Miss in the rankings at number 12, Arizona 7. So suddenly that Oregon loss is better than the Alabama loss. Plus they have better wins by a smidge, especially non-conference. Oregon should be number 2, Alabama 3. Then I would rate Ohio State at number 4. Forget the quarterback situation. We will see on Saturday night in Indianapolis how good Cardell Jones is. Even though it's pretty much an unfair audition, he gets thrown right into the fire against a legitimate top 15 defense in the country. I know that they're ranked statistically number 1 or number 2 yardage against and points against, but it's a top 15 defense. Very good Wisconsin defense that Cardell Jones is going to have to perform right out of the gate, and that's a difficult spot for Ohio State, but it's football. So the Buckeyes are going to have to impress, definitely, of course, win the game, first and foremost. Baylor at 6, and I have a huge issue with this. Okay, let's explain this. TCU is getting the nod over Baylor, and they continue to climb up the rankings according to the College Football Playoff Committee. And I understand that TCU on most weeks is more impressive than Baylor. And if you would ask me, TCU is a better football team than Baylor. But it's not about us watching teams and saying they're better than them. They played head-to-head. Baylor defeated TCU. I know the game was in Waco. That's how football schedules work. They don't play on neutral fields. Neutral field philosophy is just conjecture. That's all it is to say, and I continue to hear this every day, TCU would beat them on a neutral field. We don't know that. We know that Baylor did beat TCU in reality, in person, in the flesh. Baylor won the game over TCU. I could even though I would disagree with it, I could understand the logic if we were comparing Florida State and Oregon. And let's say they played each other. And Florida State nipped Oregon in a similar fashion than Baylor defeated TCU. They came back from 21 down in the fourth quarter. They won 61-58 at Florida State. So Florida State won the game, but then the Pac-12 we consider to be so much better than the ACC. So Oregon's got a better track record top to bottom, even though they lost the head-to-head to Florida State. That's not the situation here. These teams play in the Big 12, where they have a true conference champion, because everybody plays everybody. They play 9 like games. The only difference between Baylor and TCU in scheduling is Minnesota. A decent football team, not a great team, 8-4, one of the top 25 or 30 teams in the country. TCU beat a good Minnesota team at home when Minnesota was playing not to the caliber of football that it's playing right now, but still beat a decent Minnesota team. Baylor beat nobody non-conference, and you know how much I hate that. Baylor needs to schedule. So does Mississippi State. So do some other teams out of conference. But that didn't happen. But they played 9 exact opponents, and even if you look at the results and the performance against those teams, they're pretty comparable. There are some teams that Baylor beat really bad, TCU snuck by. There are some other teams that TCU trashed and Baylor snuck by. Texas Tech being one. They're the latest example. But let's not forget that TCU squeezed by Oklahoma, probably the 4th best team in the Big 12, possibly number 3. Definitely 4th best in the Big 12. TCU won 37-33 at home. Baylor went to Oklahoma, went to Norman, won it 48-14. How about that comparison? Baylor at 6, TCU at 3 is ridiculous. The committee missed it there. I have credited their integrity and their character and their football knowledge. I have said from day one and given a zillion reasons why this task is impossible. Impossible. But I credit their integrity and character and their desire to get it as close to right as possibly can be expected. But they really messed it up here. And if this continues after a Baylor win over Kansas State, then they really blew it the first year. I'm going to throw out one scenario. What if Wisconsin, Arizona, Missouri, and Georgia Tech all win this weekend? Then you've got all the 2-loss teams beat all the 1-loss teams, or in Florida State's sake, in their case, a 0-loss team. That's chaos. List out those teams and compare them. Missouri and Alabama with 2 losses, also Mississippi State. Georgia Tech with 2, Florida State with 1, Wisconsin, Ohio State, and then throw in Michigan State with 2 losses out of the Big Ten. Oregon and Arizona with 2 losses. You would have to put the Wildcats in the playoff because they're the Pac-12 champions, plus they defeated Oregon twice. And then the Ducks, coming down from number 2, wouldn't have to slip that much considering everybody else is losing. It would be Armageddon. And I would love to see it to continue to discredit this stupid system. College football playoffs determined by humans. Look at the NFL. It works. It's objective. Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL. Formula scheduling, Everybody plays everybody. Everybody plays a difficult schedule against the other Power 5 conferences, and we can evaluate these teams and we can come up with an objective process, not a selection process by humans, but an objective system to build a playoff system. All right, I'm done. We'll be back next week to talk about the championship game results and how they affected the final college football playoff standings in the Final Four. Now it's your turn. Let's talk it up. Let's talk it up on Mark Rogers TV.